Hello and welcome to Datum. Ravi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's a wonderful weekend to stay indoors. The sun is shining and the clouds, there is not a cloud in sight, but of course we're staying indoors.
Absolutely. The show must go on. This is episode 6 of season 3. We're continuing the theme of the moment, theme pretty much for everyone, which is
Yeah.
coronavirus. So, the last episode, we talked a little bit about remote working. And this time around, we're going to bring it a little closer to home and we're going to be talking about the peripheral impacts of coronavirus and specifically the opportunities around analytics that's going to be
Mhm.
presented to certain sectors.
Yeah,
Ravi,
for sure.
go
It,
for it.
it's quite interesting with the opportunity side of things, right? Because
Right.
opportunities, maybe it sounds a bit opportunistic and like almost like disaster capitalism way, but what we're thinking of it is like a net positive, as in how do we like improve and move forward and learn from the things we're getting through in this period, right?
Exactly. It's almost it's the rare opportunity to look into certain ways of working and certain
Hmm.
concepts in society that we anticipate to happen in the future, but because coronavirus is a thing of the present, it's brought those
Yeah.
forward. So we'll go into this in more detail. But if you look at, for example, online learning, the economic impact of having a large percentage of your population on
Yeah.
unemployment, all of these things that economists and really novel thinkers have been thinking about for a long time, but it's
Hmm.
happening right now, and so they need to be collecting data so they can better understand whether the theories that they developed and coming up with, actually work in the real world.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I mean, 100 years ago, the sort of big exogenous shock we had was the First World War, right?
right,
That was
right,
the thing that was going on, which was it was a time of innovation and change and like a lot of crap things happening.
yeah,
We're in a similar situation where there is a lot of crap things happening, but
exactly.
it's an opportunity to innovate and to move forward. And as you say, there's the unique sort of take on this side of things is we have the infrastructure and technological setup to be collecting so much data to sort of start to direct net positives in the right direction.
Exactly. And just as this is like a foreshadowing a topic we're going to talk about later about climate. Climate scientists have actually put together past events that
Mhm.
have caused really big impact on our sort of societies we live in. And just to give you some sort of idea on the sort of scale of what coronavirus it looks like compared to some of these, I'll just give you the list as a very quick summary. Got the financial crisis of 2008 and 9. This is by far the smallest impact to most things. You got a Spanish flu in 1918. That slightly bigger than the financial crisis in relative terms. Then you've got the energy crisis of 1980 to 81. And then coming in, you got the recession of 1991 and 1992 as second on the list. And at the very top of the list is the Second World War, 1944 to 45. I think France actually gone into recession because
Yeah,
they've
they
had
have.
some of the worst economic performance since this era, 1944, 45, Second World War. And coronavirus, as it currently stands, as we understand all the metrics, has almost double the impact of the fallout of Second World War
Wow.
if we just talk about climate. And so it's an astronomical sort of change. If you look at unemployment numbers coming out of the US, we've seen unemployment levels that completely dwarf the 2008-9 financial crisis,
Yeah.
which at the time
Yeah, yeah,
felt
yeah.
like it was epic, right?
Exactly. And I think it's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. So I guess this episode is going to be slightly different. Like we're going to try and follow our normal format, but it's going to be more of a discussion and a bumper episode more than anything else. So
Exactly.
let's kick off. Let's start with the sort of economic impactors. We've got a few high level umbrella topics that we've thought through. So the first one, I mean, I'm linking economics and politics together. Like our world leaders, as much as we like to criticize them, they've been under the cosh massively for
Right.
the last month or so. Well, 3 months in some cases. So, for example, the UK cabinet had a meeting on Zoom. That they lauded it and posted on Twitter. I think the funny part there was in the top left, you had the meeting ID that they were using. So, of course, Zoom hurriedly within 24 hours released an update which allowed you to get rid of that when you're taking a screenshot of your Zoom meeting.
Right. Zoom bombing became a thing as well, where people were just guessing meeting codes, just typing in random numbers, and then just literally mobbing meetings.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, the economic impact's been huge, right? So we can start off with sort of unemployment and people being furloughed in the UK. So furloughing is basically indefinite leave. So it's not like using your holiday, and you're not allowed to work for your employer, but you're sort of placed on it's kind of similar to gardening leave, I guess. But in the UK, furloughing means that the government is paying 80% of your salary. And in some cases, the firm that you're working for will top up to 20%. Other cases, they won't.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Tim? I think the impacts are felt in basically every industry, right? Like even in data and tech, as well as sort of the more obvious ones you can think of, which is like grocery and retail.
Yeah, I mean this coronavirus, it's a virus that I think is symptomatic of the world we live in today, a globalized world, and we are focusing at the moment a lot on health, because I think that does come first. The health of individuals, making sure people's lives aren't put at risk unnecessarily. But the net effect is that business and the world we live in is so heavily integrated into our everyday lives that when people can't go to work and can't produce or can't do something, it's going to have a big impact on the economy. And if you just look at headline numbers, coronavirus is literally shaking up absolutely every industry. If you weren't a stable business, if you didn't have a stable plan, if you hadn't just received investment, this is literally rocking the foundation of everything you understand about your business, not just this year, but it's going to be for the next decade. Lending rates, all these things are going to change. If you look at simple headline numbers, FTSE 100 down 30% from January. I mean, that's like just 30% of the total value of the entire top 100 companies removed in 3 months.
What's insane about that is it's the worst week of the FTSE was worse than the dot-com bubble, Black Monday, and the financial crisis in 2009. Like it's genuinely tanking. Like I think every single stock market is genuinely tanking right now.
Right.
Because across the board, every company is feeling the effects. And we talked about the unemployment rates of the US, but that's effect is seen in every other country, right?
Right.
For example, the travel industry. Massively hit. Like there's those images of airports with just planes on the runway, and you just realize how many planes are in circulation at any one time, because so many of them are on the runway. And still, if you use something like Flight Radar, you can see you still got the planes whizzing around the world, like cargo reasons and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating in that sense as well. I think the sort of other long-term effect is you're seeing a lot more people not spending money because you're indoors, right? I mean, I talked a bit about I was spending money on other things, like for example online gaming versus going out for lunch. Because now I'm going to the grocery store and making my own lunch at home. It's different, right? Your money is spent elsewhere, and for those companies that are running just in time operations, people like who will get their resources and their food and whatever on the week of, and then cook it and then sort of run that quick operation. Those are the people that are getting hurt the most, because suddenly supply chains are being affected all across the board.
Right. And it's, and this is I think the thing people, I'm just going to take the iPhone as a very simple example here, because it's a product that everyone understands.
As we often do.
Probably the best product ever made after Coca-Cola, right?
Sliced bread.
Okay, sliced bread, whatever it is. You take something as simple as your phone, the phone we all know and love. It takes Apple on a good, economy's working fine. It takes Apple a week and a half to get an iPhone from the factory line to someone's hand in the store. They do this on about 200 million units per quarter. Okay? So 200 million iPhones per quarter. And it's taken Apple almost 2 decades to build a supply chain that keeps that working. They have such good analytics and forecasting on predicted sales, on all these things, to be able to order in advance chips, to have stockpiles of certain components ready to go, so that it just takes them literally 2 days to make the phone, and a week later it's in someone's hand using it like, like a replaced iPhone. That's completely gone to pot. And not only has it gone to pot, you say, okay, if it stopped for a week, well, wouldn't it just take a week to get back? Well, actually, no. The issue with supply chains is they're so fragile. If you stop all supply chains for 1 week, there's so many knock-on effects on things like just-in-time delivery, where parts are designed to arrive just at the point when they're needed to use. You've got warehouses now sitting full of stock, which aren't able to accept more stock. So there are certain factories that can't start making more things until the suppliers or the companies who purchase this stuff actually pick it up. But those companies can't pick up that stuff if they're furloughing employment, if they don't have people to work in their factories, or non-socially distant sort of setup. So this is going to have a big impact on every single consumer goods product you can think of. The only thing that I think is getting away with it at the moment is food, but I think that's going to come further down the line when you have the impact on farmers not being able to have as many workers, working, having a net negative effect on crop yield and so on and so forth. So this is like wave 1. Wave 2 will come when things that take 6 months to materialize.
Harvesting, right? Harvest time. That's when it's going to hit.
Exactly. You've got garden stores right now with plants just dying. You've got farms who create this stuff, also just crop going to waste. So this is going to take years to come out of, and you're really going to discover what companies are made of. And you could look at this almost as call this the Olympics of businesses, where if you're not well set up, if you're not agile, if you've been putting off certain things, well, now is the time you're going to pay the price for that.
I think you've seen a lot of companies start doing their digital transformation at this time, right? They've sort of always kicked that up and started saying like, hey, we should really pay attention to this, and this is the great time to do it. So I was like, no, the best time to do it was 4 years ago when you first had this idea.
Exactly.
To embed it into the habits of people, right? And I think
exactly.
We'll talk a bit more about the social impact a bit later, but that's really important. But I wanted to pivot this slightly to a more positive, and I think what I've been thinking about these positives since reading our notes is so many of these are first world problems. Like, oh man, this is going to sound really entitled when we go through these, because it's like, I wish this was happening. When of course there are parts of the world that are going to be affected by this in almost unfathomable ways.
Right.
But let's get into it anyway. So, for example, I live near a Tesco, so I'm trying to figure out when's the right time to go grocery shopping. Now, Google is great, right? So you can type in Tesco, it shows you like, oh, this is a not so busy period.
Yeah.
But what Google's showing you is a normal time at Tesco, so like a regular time, and that's the contextual data they have, right?
Yeah.
So that bar chart you see of not as busy it's not as busy given that they've got if this was a normal scenario where everyone's going to Tesco at any time of the day. But for a socially distant Tesco where you have to queue outside to get in, and it's a 1 in 1 out system. Dear God, it is not
quiet. Is not
at all.
Quiet.
Exactly.
Quiet is busy.
Exactly. Right, quiet is busy, and it's like, how can you check that? So, I've tried a bunch of different things. Like I've looked at Twitter just before I go out. No one tweets about the Tesco near me, so that was a dud to begin with. I tried having a look at live traffic data through Google. Again, not that accurate, because I can. People aren't driving; they're going to walk, or take the bus and things like this, right? So it's
funny because Google of all the companies is the one I expect to be able to make this change, because in exactly the same time frame they've released something called the COVID-19 Community Mobility Reports, where basically what they're doing is they're taking data from our phones, location data, and they're literally showing communities around the world whether people are complying to the social distancing rules or not. So if I let me share this with you now, I'll WhatsApp it to you, and then you can have a look at your. I'll just edit this so it's a bit more seamless. Cool. Just WhatsApped it to you. I think it's actually funny if you watch this and then we come back to your complaint again, because I think you'll be shocked. Why isn't this in the in the thing. So if you go to United Kingdom,
Yeah.
download the PDF, and then this is the thing I got Louisa to do, and then just search, I think Essex or Colchester. Yours would be Essex. Yeah,
Yeah,
just search
6.
Essex. Yeah. So, Ravi, what you're looking at now is that Google's obviously clearly got the ability to know the impact on the test
Yeah,
state,
for
right?
sure. Absolutely.
Like, you're looking at charts right now that tell you that in Essex, as of the 5th of April, when it comes to retail and recreation, the baseline, they have a concept of the baseline, and they have a concept of the fact that on the 5th of April it was down 81%. So
Yeah.
you'd think that they could do something blanket across all locations just to say, well, listen, under social distancing circumstances, what would have been
Yeah.
quiet should actually now be this busy. Yeah.
Maybe they have, right? And I'm just looking at it and being skeptical because it's telling me that the time I went, it was half as busy as it normally is, which I assume it was. But actually, I get there and it's like a massive queue. I'm like, oh,
Right.
man.
And they have this globally. This is not. I mean, you've just downloaded the UK PDF, but one of our colleagues, Louisa O'Brien, built a very, very quick PDF parser that was able to extract the data for all of UK.
All the level.
And I mean, if you were to go and do this for the whole data, I'd really love a viz that showed you sort of all the different comparisons. So if anyone's out there feeling enterprising, get in touch with Louisa. But it's fascinating. These are the kind of opportunities that are sort of coming up, and this data would never have been made publicly available had it not been for this situation. But it now makes you a little bit more aware of this is what Google can do with our data. Obviously, we've given consent, and they're sending it as PDFs rather than CSVs because they know what people will try and do. So they're just trying to make it a little bit more cumbersome if they can.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not going to stop most people. But it's funny.
Yeah, go on.
It's funny. If you could just step back a little bit and we talk about society as a whole, there's a level of which the businesses that have to keep going, if you think of like food supply and so on and so forth, they are also still going to have impacts. We've seen prices going up in the store, right? The people having to increase the price of goods, like loo roll. I still have no idea why that was a big trend in the UK. It's now back to normal levels, which is great. But it's going to make sort of, the technology giants just even more incumbent because they're the ones with pockets big enough to weather the storm. And then secondly, they're probably going to be the ones most ready to capitalize on this. If you look at Amazon, they must be rubbing their hands right now because AWS bills are going to be going up this month because everyone's remote, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's not talk about the state their factory workers are in. I think that's a whole different discussion.
That's a separate discussion.
Yeah. So let's move. Let's sort of pause on economics for there, and actually move on to education.
Right.
I think every single institution has now gone online. They're using whatever combination of Google. What's the word? Google Hangouts or Google Classroom versus Meet versus Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever else.
To get the weather forecast.
Oh, brilliant.
Is that
right? Fantastic.
In Chelmsford today, it will be mostly
Hey Google, stop. That was funny. So Tim's probably going to have edited that out, but we've just had a chunk of where I was going off on about education.
And Google stepped in.
My Google Home just was like, oh, you want to know about the weather in Chelmsford? No, I don't.
Yet another example of a service getting more data because guess what? Everyone's at home.
Everyone's home. Exactly. So yeah, let's pivot to education.
Right.
Everyone's using a combination of Google Classroom, Google Meet, or GoToMeeting, or all of these different ways of using online. And I think a lot of graduations are now happening online as well because the US sort of school system is finishing in the next couple of months. Yeah. So
it's funny because I have a history in higher education, and not just I went to university, but I was an SU president for 2 years, and there was a term called MOOCs, massive online courses, right? So this is like the Coursera's, the Udemy's of the world, right? And back then it was like another revenue stream that universities looked at. They never really took it seriously. It was always like a third-rate citizen to the experience that they were pitching of being on campus. But here's the big thing: the university spent 20 years kind of researching this stuff. And in the last month, nearly every single university has had to go online only as their primary method. And not only that, it looks like they're going to have to plan the summer term entirely online. So whereas, people were kind of limbering, treating it as a second-rate citizen, the Udemy's and the Coursera's of this world, who actually pioneered the platforms and made learning online, are massively benefiting right now because they actually fully invested in this philosophy. Whereas universities that didn't are scrambling to buy Teams licenses, Microsoft Teams licenses or Zoom licenses, left, right, and center. I've been privy to a few calls where just listening to people do sound checks for the first 5 minutes. It's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, here's a remote working tip. I know we're not doing that, but Ian Baldwin, my colleague, said that what they're doing is spending time at the start of every call or webinar going through how to use the tool every single time.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's so important, right? Because you're like, right, we're going to run this way. Here's how to do things. Here's how we're going to do it.
Exactly.
Let's go.
Yeah. Exactly. And you have to do it, don't you? You can't. You have to bring people with you, and this is something that universities are trying to do. But then there's a flip side, which is internet access isn't equal. There's an inequality in the quality of internet connections, right? So you have a concept where everyone's learning online, but in America, there's a big discussion about the fact that some kids don't have access to good enough internet to be able to do their homework online like they're being asked to do. So you have, literal sort of economic inequality that's having an impact on the quality of internet speeds. Here in Europe, it's not as big of an issue because compared to America, we have a much better sort of spread of internet and broadband across the whole country because of the way the infrastructures are set up. However, we still have international students, for example, who are going back to their home countries because of the coronavirus and therefore being impacted. And in universities, international students, depending on the institution, can account from roughly between 10 to 30% of the students that are particularly.
I think 60 or 70 in some of the London ones.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I'm just sort of generalizing universities here, but they can count for a large percentage. And when a large percentage of your students can't take part in the course, it puts a real threat on the biggest sort of revenue earner. International students in the UK pay a lot more per student for their education compared to home students because of the way the funding works. American listeners probably will laugh at that because American education costs a lot more when it comes to higher education, right? But that is again another very interesting thing where we want everyone to have access to education online, and yet the plumbing that provides that isn't equal, isn't widespread, and it's in many cases not even good enough to have the quality of conversation you and I are having. I mean,
100%.
First world problems. I'm watching a video of you, which is crystal clear. You're listening to my audio again, crystal clear. I'm recording it all on a lovely laptop, and it's syncing it to the cloud at the same time. I mean, that is literally not a setup that even most students have, but yet it's the most ideal setup you need. What we're doing for podcasting is exactly the interaction an academic needs in a seminar, exactly the interaction someone needs in a class.
Well, right, and I think what was interesting is we've had a discussion internally that the quality of your webcam and the quality of your audio and the stability of your internet connection is the new dressing smart for work. Right. It's like dressing smart for work is not as important as having good quality audio, good quality video, right, and being present in that sort of online digital way. Exactly. I think you mentioned Teams earlier. My favorite news story last week was Azure is full.
Yes.
So Microsoft Azure, the cloud platform, allegedly, this was not confirmed, of course. Why would they confirm it? Confirmed by Microsoft, but allegedly they ran out of room, so there was no more room in the cloud for Azure. Now, the funny part of that is, well, this brings home the fact that all the cloud is someone else's computer.
Right.
So that was quite interesting. But I mean, the thing I'm finding is every major corporation and company are doing this thing where they're offering, everyone's. This is a nice inflection point, and we'll come back to this in the social part. But people who are now unemployed or are currently furloughed or whatever else, they're now in a point where they're thinking, hey, do I need to learn something new to be more employable?
Right.
And the answer is probably yes. They're probably going to choose the answer yes and try and find what they're supposed to be learning. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is you're now getting people who might have been reticent to dig into a certain topic, then choosing to learn something brand new. So I think so many companies have done this thing where they're like, hey, for the next 90 days or 30 days, have a free license on us or a free training material.
Right.
And man, like my favorite tweet, so I tweeted about Tableau's own 90 days of free e-learning. Great. My favorite quote tweet of that was a guy who was like, I cannot wait to not finish any of the free training that I've just signed up for. And that's exactly what's going to happen. It's like when there's a Udemy sale and I buy 5 courses for 10 euro pop.
Old habits die hard, right?
I want to do this, and then it's like you've literally this period of time. The other nice social part is this period of time is literally you've got so much time, and to do stuff, and know like you are in a period where we are in control of our time and our sort of leisure. And it's like, I'd love to do that if I had more time. It's like, if you're going to learn the guitar or learn anything new, this is the time you're going to do it. If you're not going to do it now, likelihood is you're not going to do these things, right?
But
and there's also social pressure on this, right? That's the flip side, right?
Yeah.
If you've got anxiety on sort of like healthcare or social things, you're not going to be like, oh, I want to go learn the flute. Like that is not the first thing on your mind.
It's very true, and my issue with all of this is, and I have to be careful how I say this, but God forbid I get furloughed or something like that, or I just can't go to work. I don't think the first thing I'd do would be to learn another software product or sign up for a Udemy course or something like that. And it's for a very simple reason. When something like this happens, it affects not just one person, it affects the whole household.
Correct.
And for most people, you are living in a household where you live, whether you live with flatmates or your family or one other individual, right? You're kind of going through this as a household.
For sure.
The net effect is actually that in times like this, what you actually do more is spend more time sort of reflecting on yourself. One area
Correct.
where I think I have seen success is journaling has gone through the roof. A lot of people, because they're having more time to do mental reflection on where they are in life, where their jobs are. So, yes, people might decide at the end of that journey to pick up software, but if they were going to do that, they were going to do it anyway. The motivated people who know they want to do this are doing that anyway. It didn't take coronavirus to sort of bring that opportunity around. And so the opportunities people are going to take are actually going to be about self-worth, value, a lot of mental sort of challenges. Fitness, for example, that's why fitness is taking off in a big way. People want to benefit themselves. They don't want to benefit their employer, if I'm brutally honest, right?
100%.
If you didn't have to go to work, why would you pick up Tableau?
Exactly right, and I completely agree.
I say that as someone who's passionate about Tableau. I'd pick up Tableau even if it wasn't my job. But brutally speaking, I know that many of the people we work with only use the tool they use because they have to, right?
Correct.
And they want to save time. It's not that they love the tool; they want to save time. That's why they use Tableau. But given the choice of not having to pick it up, why would they?
Right, why would they? Exactly. And I think, companies like Headspace are doing some great things in this space, right? Like they're while they still have their paid subscription offering, they have an entire track that's focused purely on Corona, right? So living in a time like this and sort of the things to consider around that time. And I think a lot of people are now taking this opportunity to do that, right? And sort of take care of themselves where they can. But I 100% agree with you. Like the impact of this is not just for the individual, but for the household.
Right.
So that's quite quite important.
A better marketing angle would be if, let's say, Tableau said, "Hey, we're gonna do some courses. Here's all the courses, but we're gonna do a special course where you and your family can get to grips with understanding the coronavirus through data, right? That, I think, is something you would do with your family, right? And that's sort of the marketing angle that's just missing from a lot of this, just a little bit of context on what people are going through and seeing how you can help them understand the facts rather than becoming yet another thing someone needs to add on their to-do list.
Yeah, I think I like the point about the education piece, because one of the things, so I think that one of the key heroes on social media, at least of this period, is the Financial Times John Byrne Murdoch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So John Byrne Murdoch is in the best possible way killing the game with really informative visuals. But I think the most important thing he's doing is, alongside everything that he's producing and sharing, and this extends to the Financial Times data team as well, who are doing some incredible work and really powerful
really
in the way that they're communicating this. But they're educating people along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, John made the conscious decision not to do per capita. He's made the conscious decision to look at the different ways of displaying the data. And I think that even this week he's pivoted to a 7-day rolling average rather than raw new cases.
Right.
And I think what's really interesting is this is a really good opportunity to increase that data literacy and vis literacy across the board as well. Right. And I think that's something that they in particular are doing well. So shouts to the boy John Byrne Murdoch for that sort of thing.
Right. Okay, let's take another tangent and pivot to healthcare, which seems obvious, right? It's just last night I was out at 8:00 clapping for the National Health Service. By the way, the Americans think of NHS as something called socialized medicine. It's a politicized term in America because of the elections, right?
Yeah,
so the term socialized medicine is being created to kind of create fear about the way we do things here in the UK. And because, the healthcare systems in the two countries is very different. Mind you, we don't have the best healthcare system in terms of outcomes. I think Italy probably has one of the best, and then Sweden as well. The Scandinavian countries are quite high on that. But at a time where the healthcare system is essentially the front line of dealing with this virus. In the first instance, treating patients while we don't have an answer. In the second instance, testing. In the third instance, helping find an answer. Then in the fourth instance, helping deliver the answer, right? So there's 4 pillars here. Oh God, I'm talking like Matt Hancock here, but there's 4 pillars. It's good. It's worked.
Amazing.
There's 4 pillars to this whole strategy, right? And the healthcare system is going to play an important role every single time. And what has been really interesting is, obviously, just looking at the statistics. Just the other day, the National Statistics Office released updated figures on the death toll, and as it transpired, the way we collect data meant there was a misreporting of death toll caused by coronavirus, because the numbers that we were getting up until a week ago only involved those who were admitted to hospital and then died in hospital.
Yes.
And as a result of that, we weren't getting reported deaths outside of hospital context, so those who've died in the community. So where in the UK, when you die in the community, that essentially means you might have died in a care home or in one of these sort of hospices that exist outside of the system. Those aren't actually recorded by the NHS because they're not supported. They're not part of the NHS. Typically, they're normally private or charity funded. And so just statistically, getting a very simple number out of the system has proved to have taken a month because of the lag that requires to collect, analyze, check that data, and then report it as official statistics. And that's been a really interesting kind of challenge.
I think on top of that, you've also got the fact that the data that's being reported globally isn't the same.
Right.
So, for example, that exists not just in the UK, but that exists in every other country. As well as on top of that, you've got the difference in the way that it's reported, right?
Right.
How many of these people are directly coronavirus versus any other affiliated disease, right?
Right.
All of these different things, everyone has the different ways of defining that, and I think everyone, I think there's a few. This can be again turned into political football and sort of peddling the stats and snake oil, lies, damn lies, and the statistics sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to some information is better than no information, and this is again as we said before, this is a time where the data we're collecting is so important. There's an app that's gone around, which is done by one of our customers, Guys and St Thomas, among other charities and institutions, where you can self-report. So there's an app that, and again, this is spread through word of mouth, but it's not as widespread as it should be. And I don't think people are logging their status personally as much as they could be.
Right.
So, for example, like these could really help to add to the models and start finding out. Now, alongside this, the other thing that I think, in my opinion, is being laid bare is for the NHS in particular is the technological lag versus the private sector. So, for example, the systems that they're using aren't perhaps the cutting edge systems they could be using. For example, when they're building models out and doing this data collection, there could be so many smarter ways of doing it, but given the underfunding nature of it and sort of the technology lag that they face because of security and all of these things they have to have in place, given the sensitivity of the data they use, they're not able to, right? So, for example, with if you want to create a model, they could use software like Data Robot to do that, to deploy that and ingest it and do it at scale.
Yeah,
but they can't, right? Because it's an expensive product and it's sort of aimed for big banks in the private sector.
Exactly. I mean, one debate that's really frustrated me actually is testing, because journalists in the UK just literally driving me up the wall at the moment, because at a time where we need really good questions to be asked, they're asking some of the most inane questions I've ever come up with.
100%.
Journalists that I've respected are just coming out with really poor follow-up questions because they evidently don't understand how data works, and they don't understand, more importantly, the context behind every number. So testing has been a big topic, and I've been getting really frustrated. I'm getting visibly frustrated now because there's this constant reference to the German healthcare system and its ability to do so many tests. And what every single journalist seems to just ignore is the context, right? Why is it that Germany can do so many tests? Well, it turns out they're one of the few countries that was meticulously well prepared by coincidence to be able to handle the amount of tests they run. Their healthcare system is set up completely differently. Each of the 16 federal states makes their own decisions. So you get really good regional responses, whereas here in the UK, it's been argued that social distancing is really unfair in quiet communities where people social distance anyway because the population numbers are so low, right? So it's been unfair because of the positive impact on London has a negative impact on, I don't know, Fife in Scotland, if I take that as a quiet town somewhere in Scotland, right? The other thing is all of the testing capabilities. Coincidentally, Germany is a hub for this stuff. They've got so many companies, private companies, that are specialized in the testing equipment and the chemicals required to do the testing. It's a bit like asking, well, why is your grass greener? Oh, it's just because I happen to have a plot of land on some really rich soil. That's basically what it equates to.
Correct.
But no one is saying that in their questions. People just expect the UK to magically turn into this
correct
company.
and again, not to get too political, but one of my favorite sort of comments from someone who was in Germany was in the German system, we don't clap for our NHS. We show our appreciation by funding it.
Yeah, exactly.
Fundamentally, that is exactly right? We talked about this a bit earlier in the pod, and it's sort of like, well,
wowzers, yeah. You put your money where your mouth is, right? Let's stop clapping. Let's start funding it. God.
And we've got this concept of key workers now in the UK, and it's like, well, yeah, let's actually
start
put
paying
our money
them proper
into
money. Yeah,
paying people in the supply chain, paying people in the factories, paying people who are doing like postal workers, all of these people that are still going in and putting their lives at risk, right? By doing so.
And it's more than just pay. It's something that's come out from a lot of healthcare professionals is that they feel suddenly valued. Like they were never in it for the money. But
no, 100%.
The biggest, the biggest benefit for most of the people who are working in this healthcare system has actually been the fact that for once their profession, their industry is being recognized by society as being vital. People going out the way to send them food, and this is generosity they've never seen in their profession. But for many of them, it's why they went into that profession, because they wanted to be that kind of person in society, and this is a job that allowed them to do that. And so there's also that context that, I think people aren't bringing into this. And again, I really hope that, like you eloquently sort of highlighted there, that we stop clapping for the NHS when this is all over, and we really start to take a long look at not just the NHS, but all healthcare provision, and start funding it so we have the kind of system that we want next time this kind of event comes around every 50 years, apparently.
Yeah, exactly, and it will, right? It will. It's not going to be something that just disappears. And if you, there are so many studies. I was sent a study from 2007 which talks about COVID-19, like 2007. But yeah, let's move on to thinking about the data and analytics directly about around healthcare. What are your thoughts on sort of the opportunities and ideas that could come up from here?
So there's an interesting concept. I talked about 4 pillars. One of them being finding the cure and then delivering the cure. There's an interesting project called Folding at Home, which sounds like a really weird name. And basically what it is, it's a community-sourced project where you essentially lend your computing power to a project, and that project basically uses the computational power of your computer to process protein molecules and simulate them so that they can help find cures to diseases, right? And so one of the really important aspects of this whole coronavirus thing is that in order to find the solution, what scientists have to do is simulate protein chains really, really quickly. And AI is actually the key way of doing this. So what literally happens is you take a protein molecule, you simulate its shape, and then you interact with the thing you're trying to solve. And you basically simulate using physics, just raw physics, you simulate how those two things interact, given a bunch of variables. And by simulating that, you can actually find much, much faster than doing the actual tests yourself, possible cures for coronavirus. So I've had this running on my computer. Actually, every time I walk away from my computer, it uses the graphics processor and the 6 cores of my CPU. I have 8 cores on there, so it uses 6 of the 8 cores. And I'm processing protein chains on behalf of this project. And this project went from having about 30,000 people donating their computing power globally to about 400,000 in the space of 2 weeks. And they've had really sort of funny challenges. Because they had so many people join the project, they're actually working through a lot of they're called work units. Work units are tasks, essentially, much, much faster. Right. But also companies like Microsoft, Intel are starting to donate computing power to this cause, because they're realizing A, it's getting traction, but B, it's actually starting to solve problems, and researchers can then use this data to quickly analyze stuff. So we're basically doing the legwork initially so that someone can come in and do the analysis. And it's literally sort of things like this, which are happening at scale. This is a community-run initiative. There are private initiatives as well, doing the same thing, benefiting off the same data. And technology is going to be the forefront of how we solve this, whether it's China doing the way they track people, that's been lauded as a successful technique to manage social distancing using technology to do it in a smart way. On the flip side of that, surveillance. That's always a topic that comes up, but won't go into it, but always a topic that comes up. There's other instances in China again where they're using robots to do cleaning activities using ultraviolet light. The idea there being is that you don't have to put someone at risk in order to do that. So robots are being repurposed around the world to basically go around hospitals using UV lights to clean and sterilize entire floors in a very quick and efficient way, in a way that a cleaner could never do, just using sort of everyday sort of tools. And so we're seeing the emergence of technology being maybe hastily adopted, but in many ways doing good, at least for now. And the key question remains is, when this is all over, will those initiatives still be there? Will surveillance still be there? And this always happens, right? In America, you had the Terrorism Act brought in after 9/11. It's still there, and it's still used today. They never took it away once they brought it in. So, and the same here in the UK. These initiatives, once they're there, well, they become very difficult to remove, because as a mechanism, it's kind of convenient and you can use it again and again and again.
Correct. Correct. I think this is a good time to pivot to social distancing and talk about the people impact of things, right?
Right.
So social distancing is the concept of sort of staying 2 meters away from people when you're out and about, and not going, just staying at home and only going out for what's the word?
Essential activities.
Only going out for essential activities, exactly, and trying to find ways to police this, I guess, and also share that news, right? So I mean, I don't own a television. Sorry, I own a television. I don't pay for the TV license. I use streaming services instead. So for me, how am I getting the public news broadcast? Well, I've got social media. So I've got Twitter, I've got YouTube. Beyond that, like if we're sent into total lockdown and I've spent the entire 3-day period over Easter playing games on my PlayStation, not checking social media, having a complete break from that.
Right.
I have no idea. Like, there is nothing that tells me that, apart from maybe I'll get a message or something like that.
Do you not get the letter, Ravi?
I've not got the letter, actually.
I
don't have. Okay, well, I haven't got the letter. I've not had post for about a week now.
Here, look, I'll show you. Official 10 Downing Street letterhead. It's signed by Boris. It arrived when he was admitted into intensive care, which made the signature a little bit disingenuous, but I'm glad he's on the road to recovery, as it is, on a more serious note. But
yeah, for sure.
Snail mail is basically what the government sent to update everyone, right? There's
why are we not all why are we not all forced to have an app on our phone? Why are we not getting push notifications from a government app? Why are we not getting text messages from the government?
I think because people do. Do you remember when we had the discussions in the UK about digital identities, right? They had I think this idea of a national identity card with biometrics got canned because I think the company behind building the system has actually been found to have had sort of really bad data breaches and leaks, and so the whole thing got canned for a long period of time. If you look at the NHS, they actually do have an app which you can sign up and look at your own medical records from your general practitioner there as well. Mm-hmm. The people always have irrational fears about this. I say irrational because in a broad sense, there's other ways of getting the same data. But I think, once you have an app on your phone that's run by the government, it starts to get a little bit, even I'd personally be a little bit uncomfortable. For example, the first time it asks for my location, access to my location, right? Because there's just something different when it's the government tracking your location compared to a third-party company you can go to, start paying for, delete off your phone. Exactly. When it's a government, I think people rightly have a little bit more sort of suspicion of what happens with that data. That said, in certain situations, it's a useful mechanism for communicating with people, and I think should be explored. It should be explored. There should be these press briefings again. Really irritate me. I kind of wish they didn't have journalists on this press briefing. Honestly, I know it's called a press briefing for a reason, but I wish it was actually called a national address. And questions from the public came through.
I feel like you're absolutely right. I think that the reason that there's sort of uncertainty is the government isn't ever really held to account. Well, it hasn't been, at least for the last 10 years,
right?
By the media, right? So if the media is not holding them to account, then of course people aren't going to trust the media, right?
Right.
So because now there's also media in the case of so you can subscribe to the media that it follows your views. So you always feel gratified and correct, right?
That's why people go to the Guardian versus the Daily Mail versus the Sun versus all of these. You go to the one that reinforces your beliefs, and you go to the one where the writing style suits your mindset, and that's why they all exist happily in an ecosystem, because there's enough variety there in what we all expect to read and want to see.
For sure. So the things that have changed with social distancing, I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier today, like shopping habits have changed. I think what's really funny is I was speaking to a couple of friends who are like, man, so normally I'd buy my dinner on the way home. So what do you mean? He's like, well, I'd stop at the Sainsbury's and pick up what I'm having for dinner that night. It's like, so what are you doing now? He's like, well, I have to plan my meals.
Yeah.
So it's
true. It's true. Especially in London,
it's that change.
It's there's a whole change in everything. I'm noticing it. I'm spending on average 2 times what I normally spend when I go to Tesco for 2 reasons. Because I'm buying for longer periods of time. If I have to queue for 20 minutes to get in, I don't want to go as often as I can. So I'm walking in, and not only am I walking in, I'm not stockpiling anything, but I'm also thinking, yes, that would be nice to have in case. This whole in case methodology turns up whilst you're browsing the shelves, right? If it keeps for 5 months, I'll buy it just in case. At some point in the next 2 months, I decide to bake cookies, which is something I apparently did today. I bought cookie chips because I thought I might make cookies in the next 2 weeks. Have no plan to. Just I might do it.
It's choice, right? You want the choice to be available for you to do it, right? I think that's the thing that people are finding hardest. I think
it's crazy.
The fact that choice is taken away from you, that you can't just go to the shop and be like, "Hey, I fancy jelly today. I'm going to go buy that." Right.
And on the flip side, we joke about sort of our choices and the choices we have. On the flip side, there are people in society, unfortunately, who don't have those choices. Things like food banks and so on and so forth, who are struggling to serve the amount of people, especially given the increase in unemployment and furlough, are struggling to get the food to the people they need to in this scenario. And I was saying to my brother, he works in the government civil service scheme, and I was talking to him about this concept of I think you touched on it earlier before we started, of universal basic income, but also this idea of a communist sort of system, which is almost like this is actually the perfect time to just say, whoa, everybody, just stop stockpiling stuff. Let's put a little bit of control on our resources here and give equal access to everyone, and the elderly, those who need it the most. Let's just ensure everyone, a bit like in Liverpool where they've taken homeless people off the streets.
So what I mean, the US basic income is exactly right now would be the perfect time, right? People are furloughed, but you want to give them disposable income so they can spend money to help other businesses keep going.
Right.
That is fundamentally what universal basic income is. So Andrew Yang in the US, I followed his campaign quite closely because he sort of follows a lot of sort of the tech focused views that I have that for running and sort of modernizing the way the government's run. What was interesting is he was like, well, you rebrand universal basic income as the freedom dividend in the US, and they love it. They're like, yeah, hell yeah, pay me for being free. And it's exactly the same concept.
Yeah,
and I think universal basic income has this unfortunate branding problem where it's been sort of given this idea, and it is fundamentally, everyone just sees it as communism and socialism.
It's innate.
When really it could be such a big benefit, especially right now.
Yeah, I think it's innate to our human nature, right? No one wants to be seen to be given handouts. Everyone wants to earn their place. It's this sort of, everyone wants to be a secret hero. Everyone wants to just feel valued, and the term universal basic income just sounds like a handout, right? And therefore, people automatically, whilst they're happy to benefit from it, feel a little bit uneasy because it's just like, well, this is different. This isn't what I was taught all my life,
but fundamentally, imagine the society where we're all getting what, £5,000 extra a year, which is universal basic income. Now we're getting that, and now we're in this situation. I want to give half of that to the NHS directly, and that is a mechanism you can do. Like it's creating these tools and levers for people to actually be able to impact and do that in this time where a lot of people do feel helpless. They don't have that ability to make that small differences.
Right. Like you and I have both read Nudge there, and
yeah.
Do you know how that turns out? Nudge is a great book if anyone's not had a chance to read it. Who's the author? Is it Daniel Kahneman?
No, it's Cass and Sunstein.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm confusing books. Thinking Fast and Slow is the other one.
Kahneman's that one. Yeah, it's Thaler and Sunstein, is not Cass.
Right.
Yeah, I'm getting my behavioral economists mixed up again.
Oh man, they must be having a field day right now, right? This is behaviorally like behavioral scientists. Full stop. Never mind behavioral economics.
I love it.
In itself. So yeah, it's funny how this is going to have such a big impact on society, and how I love for the people who've been working at home all their lives, nothing has changed for them, and so
nothing's changed for you, Tim.
Broadly speaking, I mean, I'm quite used to this. I already had a good setup at home. What is difficult, I think, is people adapting to this world when they weren't set up for it. Especially if you've got family at home. I mean, it's easy for me to work from home. I don't have a child. I haven't, I haven't had to like overcome some of the challenges that people are having to overcome because I'm not at that same point in life. So whilst it's okay for me to say yes, I can work from home, and I have been for a while, and I'm used to this. Yes, but I don't have a family. I don't have all these other challenges that will transpire if you're living with more people. So,
for sure, yeah.
I think we do have to take a little bit of a longer look as well. Looking back to last week, companies will have to rethink how they manage that, because going forward, people aren't just going to want to go back to work. People are going to want to work from home. They've proved that they can work from home for 3 months. And you've trusted them to do that. So it's no longer a question about trust and social norms. It's now simply a question of, are your policies up to date or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing you're seeing changes habits, right? So the fact is, people's habits are changing right now. I think we've talked a bit about like the Amazon like delivery service before, like the fact that that's probably the most they're doing so well right now.
Yeah.
But people are getting used to that on-demand shopping. Like I think we're going to get so many more people doing online grocery shopping now. You're going to get so many more people doing breaking those habits they used to have about going out for lunch and things like this that they wouldn't have done before.
Yeah.
So this is a great time to break those habits. So like those people that wouldn't be using Hangouts or Teams or all these other softwares.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're breaking these habits and changing the way people think because it's no longer that CAR model we talked about, which is cue, action, response, right?
Yeah.
You're then having to break that cycle and you have to create new habits.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because Ocado and all these online delivery systems, it's kind of funny because Ocado is one of the few supermarkets that has an entirely automated warehouse. And by that I mean they don't have a single person that picks your shopping for you. It's all done through a robotic system. So the bottleneck for a company like Ocado hasn't been picking the food and getting it into the right baskets. It's been the number of drivers they have to actually deliver that stuff. And so that's going to be a really interesting dynamic because touching on that, the companies that are best suited to respond to this are already semi-automated. Amazon has some semi-automated warehouses. They can just keep stuff going without a single person. And even if they need people, they have very few, so social distancing works perfectly fine. Look at a data center. Literally the best place to work if you're socially distancing yourself. There's only about 10 people in a single data center. No one else can go in. And the place is so vast that you could all work.
And it's so clean.
Yeah, it's so clean as well. They're incredibly clean. That's why Apple and all these companies are sourcing masks, because inherently their production and data centers require this level of cleanliness that actually works for healthcare purposes. And so the companies that are responding to this in a strong way, unfortunately, aren't the ones we should be looking at in the future, because they're probably going to make more people unemployed if they carry on with their sort of their automated approach. And so this concept of universal basic income becomes even more prevalent because the companies that are keeping us up going now, Deliveroo, all these ones, the back-end systems don't require people in an office. They're entirely remote.
I mean, you're seeing this already. Like I was calling a government agency last weekend and then foolishly forgot that obviously no one's going to pick up the phone because they all work in call centers, and no one's going to a call center right now because it's probably not a great place to be.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking, well, one of my banks that I have, they sent me an email being like, no, all call centers are still running because every one of our workers is now working from home and doing it that way.
Yeah.
Right. So
they have the software to do it.
You're going to find these two things, right? First of all, you're going to get people who are doing their jobs then remotely, which is going to create and enhance the gig economy in a massive way.
Yeah.
I could be spending the morning answering phones and the afternoon doing babysitting, right? All of these different things, right? You're able to start combining.
Problem you're
and
trying to solve.
And then the second thing is you're going to get chatbots and AI start to pick up things as well. So this is huge in China, right? WeChat is absolutely massive. It has integration for days. Like from WeChat, you can order food, tell them what you want, and then tell them where you live, and that's all done automatically.
Yeah.
And I think that's people are gonna seriously start looking into those features.
Yeah.
Because as we said, e-commerce is doing probably the best in this situation.
Yeah.
But even then,
it's funny because when we talk about WeChat in the Western world, people always think, oh, that's what they use in China, right? Like, and we don't ever have a concept of, well, what kind of scale does WeChat have compared to all these other services? And it's actually quite big, given that it's predominantly used in one geography. Okay, it has close to 1 billion monthly users. Okay, and you might look at Facebook. Well, Facebook has 2 billion. Services like WhatsApp has 1.2 billion. So you think, oh, what's 1 billion compared to 1.2 billion? Well, the difference is WhatsApp is global, whereas WeChat is just one country. So in the context of China, specifically where this is heavily used, that's a phenomenal amount of penetration. That's higher levels of penetration than you'd ever think is normal in a single society. And if you look at WhatsApp in the UK, for example, it doesn't have anywhere near the kind of penetration that WeChat
definitely
has.
Not.
In
but
China.
Then WhatsApp in Africa and in Asia for sure
has very strong,
massive. And this is why WhatsApp put in restrictions on the amount of forwarding you can do.
Yeah, iMessage in America is pretty big. Yeah,
exactly. Every single country and localization has their own sort of mechanism that everyone sort of uses, and it's fascinating to see. I think that in India it's fascinating because everyone will have a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a landline. No. Everyone has access to internet and data.
Yeah.
And then this becomes their primary source of work. Like I was, booking some travel when I was in Kenya, and everything was done via WhatsApp. It was fascinating.
Yeah. You've got services like M-Pesa in Kenya, which is mobile payments. I mean, we laugh about mobile banking here in the UK, but honestly, the UK or the Western world has nothing on what services like M-Pesa are doing in Africa. It's really revolutionized mobile payments, and they're just using simple things like text messages. It's not even like breakneck technology or contactless. None of that. It's really sort of groundbreaking use of very old systems that everyone can use to make payments. It's fascinating. Right, we've got one more topic on the list, which is the climate, and I think this is probably a more.
It's a feel good.
Yeah, this is
a feel good,
right? And so coronavirus and the climate. What do you think? Oh, well, what are the connections? Well, it's the positive impacts actually of the fact that we're using transport 80% less. So things like CO2 emissions, the climate, the air, the waterways, they're all becoming cleaner. And I put this in here because, maybe first I'll touch on a few stories that we're seeing. I put a link in the show notes to someone took a photo in Venice of the waterways, and they were shocked at how clear the waterways actually are when there's no boats, kind of making it dirty, as it were. And then since that's happened, we've now had fish and dolphins returning back to the waterways in places where people have never seen dolphins before, because these are just their natural habitats when when the water's clean, when it's not sort of overpopulated by humans in essence. In London and China, we've seen air quality improve massively because, again, transport is down 80%. And some of these are going to have long-lasting sort of impacts, at least for this year.
I mean, relatives of mine in India have sent me similar pictures from Punjab, where you can see the Himalayas for the first time in hundreds of years. They said about 100 years, they've not seen it as clearly.
Right.
Like no one has seen it for ages, and then everything's cleared up because people aren't going out, people are staying home, all of these different sort of mechanisms, and people are social distancing. We're not flying as much, right? We're not traveling as much. All of these are like petrol. All of these things are dropping, and suddenly it's healing, and it's really, really cool. I mean, the thing, I live next to a main road, so what's fascinating is in the last 3 days, the amount of traffic going through is increased, and I think that is because of the extended Easter break. But the last 3 weeks, oh man, like when you get to the evening, from about 6 o'clock onwards, nothing.
Right.
No one's out and about. It's like a Sunday afternoon.
Right. Exactly. And it's a fascinating outcome of all of this. At the very beginning of the episode, I talked about sort of different impacts of the past. So I talked about financial crisis, Spanish flu, energy crisis. Just to give some context, if we just take the Second World War, the yearly change in global emissions during the Second World War, 1944 to 45, was roughly about 800 million tons, a decline in CO2 emissions. Now, the coronavirus, compared to that, is going to be about 1,500 million tons. I think that's technically a billion. I don't know if I'm going to do an American billion or a UK billion.
Yeah.
Like, right? It depends where you are. So I'll just say 1,500 million tons of CO2 decline just in the period that we've been locked down for. And so what's interesting about climate is, number one, if you're doing a survey right now about populations of wildlife or certain species, well, this has pretty much buggered up your results because you were expecting to be doing it in a circumstance where things weren't so good. But on the flip side, I'm really hoping that people are collecting data because this is a rare opportunity to know what actual impact we have on the world, right? You were never going to be able to ask people to not go to work for a week, to just measure what the drop in CO2 levels is. But if you have all these testing initiatives out, you've been able to see the gradual decline and then see how long it's taking wildlife to come back. Those measurements are vital because for so long we have theories about what are the positive impacts of doing X versus Y and electric cars versus Y. But we've never had the data to show the decline and then the impact and then the consequence. And here's an opportunity naturally given to us to do exactly that.
Exactly, and I think that it will help so much with the fight for the new Green Deal and all these different things that we're doing.
Right.
Around climate change and making sure that the global warming crisis isn't sort of exacerbated in the next 50 years, right? It's funny, like 50 years' time, we're either going to be hit by another killer virus or the Earth will be like burnt to a crisp or something similar, right?
Right.
Or like rising sea levels.
And we're pretty lucky. I hate to use this
100%.
word. I hate to use this word on the coronavirus, but in terms of its mortality compared to viruses of the past, it's a fairly low. I mean,
the technological advances of the today, right? Compare that to the Spanish flu.
Yes, exactly. And so in some respects, we're lucky that this hasn't had as high mortality rate. But my God, is it an awakening of what we need to do? And we need to take more lessons than just the healthcare impacts, the economic impacts. We need to also look at the climate and say, well, listen, we did actually figure out how to work remotely for 3 months. What if, in order to save our climate, we didn't do necessarily that, but we started to implement rules and restrictions? Like a simple one I was talking to my brother
hibernating,
about.
mate.
Hibernating would be one, but a simple one would be to ask all businesses to have 30% of their workforce work remotely at any given time, right? And so that would naturally reduce the use of transport by 30%. Then on the flip side of that, you'd reduce strain. You maybe wouldn't have to invest as much on transport because you'd reduce the strain off the system. And then you could invest that money into healthcare instead. I mean, I'm just talking spitballing economics here. I'm doing linear correlations between stuff on the fly, which is not how it works, I'm sure. But these are the kind of really sort of bold decisions. We now have an opportunity. These are the opportunities we now have to sort of take advantage of this and see where things go.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great place to sort of finish. But
right.
I mean, if we follow the what, so what, now what? I mean, the now what is like we don't know what's next. We have no idea.
No idea. Who knows? No one knows. And in some ways, that's good because it shows that as people, we can react fairly quickly to these things and come up with an answer. And I hope when we reflect, we'll think we've done the right thing.
There's also a return on community spirit, and there's so many positives you can look at in this. Right? You've got people being so considerate of others. Like I said, the key workers sort of championing, and it's and the climate. There's so many positives coming out of this, and it's just making sure that we maintain and sustain those.
Exactly.
Moving forward.
All right.
So that was a bumper podcast from us, Tim. I think that was an hour-long special.
Just over.
I think do send us some feedback and thoughts. Any positives that you've seen in your industry, in your world, over the last month or two. So that's at DatumPod on Twitter, and our email, Tim.
datumpodcast@gmail.com.
Fantastic. So everyone take care, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Take it easy.